The problem Germany faced, why their weapons were no longer enough. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941, German infantry marched with confidence. They were well-trained, well-coordinated, and supported by an army that had shocked Europe with blitzkrieg. But in their hands, one thing had not changed since the early stages of the war: their rifles. Most German infantry carried the Karabiner 98K, a bolt-action rifle, accurate, reliable, but slow. 5 rounds, manual cycling, designed for the long-range infantry battles of World War I. It was a superb hunting rifle, but the Eastern Front was not a hunt. It was chaos. The reality of combat was changing. By 1941-1942, infantry fighting distances were shrinking drastically. Dense forests, ruined towns, trenches, villages, factories, and the brutal close-quarter fighting around places like Smolensk, Kharkov, and Stalingrad changed the nature of war. German after-action reports repeatedly stated, most engagements occur within 300 meters. Within 300 meters, the Kar-98K had a problem: too slow to fire rapidly, too slow to cycle under pressure, too slow when Soviet infantry launched sudden attacks. Meanwhile, the Soviets were using SVT-40 semi-automatic rifles, PPSH-41 submachine guns up to 900 rounds per minute, large quantities of automatic weapons issued at squad and platoon level. German squads could suppress, but they couldn't match the volume of fire. The imbalance was growing. The submachine gun, a partial fix, not a solution. Germany fielded the MP-38 and MP-40 submachine guns, iconic weapons of the war. But they were not a universal answer. Short range, pistol caliber rounds, limited penetration, high ammunition consumption. Only squad leaders and special units received them. A bolt-action rifle for distance, a submachine gun for close combat, but nothing for the middle, the range where 80% of infantry combat actually took place. The missing piece, a new class of weapon. German tactical analysts recognized the gap. The Wehrmacht needed a rifle that could fire rapidly, handle close combat, reach out to medium ranges, stay accurate under automatic fire, give one soldier the firepower of several, something between an SMG and a full-power rifle. But such a weapon did not exist anywhere in the world. Not in America, not in Britain, not in the Soviet Union. No one had built it. The concept didn't even have a name yet. The Germans simply called it the intermediate weapon. The cartridge problem. Full-power rifle rounds like 7.92 by 57 were accurate, powerful, long range, but they were overkill at 300 meters and impossible to control in automatic fire. Pistol rounds were too weak. Germany needed something new. An engineer wrote, "We do not need more power, we need more control." The search for a perfect middle ground cartridge had begun. This was not just the start of the STG-44. It was the beginning of the modern assault rifle concept. Long before the weapon existed, the problem already existed, and so did the enemy who forced this evolution. To solve this, Germany would create a new type of ammunition, the 7.92 by 33 Kurz, and accidentally begin a revolution in infantry warfare. The birth of a new idea. The intermediate cartridge revolution. Before the STG-44 could exist, before a new rifle could even be designed, Germany had to solve a far deeper problem: the ammunition itself. A rifle is built around its cartridge, not the other way around. And the German army had realized that their standard full-power round, 7.92 x 57 Mauser, was simply too much for the realities of 1941 to 1942. Why the old cartridge no longer worked. The Mauser round had enormous power. It could kill at 1,000 meters, punch through cover, and remain lethal far beyond human visual clarity. But infantry combat had changed. Soviet troops attacked in waves. Battles took place inside towns. Trenches and forests limited visibility. Storm groups needed fast, accurate automatic fire. Soldiers fought on streets, not in open fields. Full power rounds had major issues. Uncontrollable recoil in automatic fire. Heavy ammunition load for soldiers. Rifles overheated rapidly. Weapons became too long and heavy. A German ordnance officer summarized, "We possess firepower beyond the distance where infantry actually fights." The solution wasn't more power. It was the right power. The search for an intermediate round. The Heereswaffenamt, Army Weapons Office, began exploring a radical idea. A new cartridge, shorter and lighter than the Mauser round, yet far more potent than a pistol cartridge. The goal: effective to 300 to 400 meters, controllable in automatic fire, lighter weight, reduced recoil, more ammunition per soldier. Something entirely new. This idea had never been seriously pursued before by any major army. Germany was about to invent what the world would later call the intermediate cartridge, creating the 7.92 x 33 Kurz. The development centered around a shortened version of the Mauser cartridge. Original, 7.92 x 57. New concept, 7.92 x 33. A literal short round, hence the name Kurzpatron, or Kurz, short. Its key innovations: far less recoil, ideal power for mid-range combat, significantly lighter ammunition, controllable burst fire, compatibility with compact rifles. One German engineer wrote, "This cartridge is the key to a new type of soldier." It wasn't just a design, it was doctrine. Why Kurz was a revolution. For the first time in military history, a cartridge was created specifically for automatic fire, specifically for mid-range infantry combat, specifically for lightweight, fast rifles, specifically for giving every soldier the firepower of a squad. This cartridge would allow a rifle to fire semi-auto accurately, fire controlled bursts, fire full auto when needed, remain compact enough for assault troops. Kurz was the missing piece. Now Germany could build something truly new, a rifle that could dominate at the ranges where men actually fought, not at distances imagined in pre-war doctrine. Skepticism inside the German high command. Not everyone believed in the idea. Old school officers preferred long-range marksmanship, heavy rifles, traditional cartridges, bolt-action reliability. They doubted the need for a new weapon class. But reports from the Eastern Front told a different story. Soviet troops overwhelming positions. German squads outgunned at close and mid-range. Semi-auto rifles proving insufficient. Urban combat demanding rapid fire. The battlefield was changing faster than doctrine. Kurz wasn't optional. It was necessary. With the new cartridge ready, Germany needed a rifle to use it. And two companies stepped forward to design the world's first true assault rifles, MKB-42H and MKB-42W. Designing the first assault rifles, MKB-42H and MKB-42W. With the new 7.92 by 33 Kurz cartridge approved for trials, Germany could finally pursue something revolutionary. A weapon designed from the ground up for rapid fire at realistic combat distances. The concept didn't have a name yet. Assault rifle was still years away. But the two prototypes that emerged would become the ancestors of the STG-44 and the ancestors of every modern assault rifle that came after. They were called MKB-42H, designed by Haenel, led by Hugo Schmeisser, MKB-42W, designed by Walther, and they represented two different visions of the future. Why this moment was historic. Before these prototypes, no major army had created a lightweight rifle, firing an intermediate cartridge, capable of both semi-auto and full-auto fire, controllable, accurate to 300 to 400 meters, suitable for general infantry use. Germany was the first nation to attempt this seriously. The MKB series were not experiments. They were the first true assault rifles in history, even before the name existed. MKB-42H, Schmeisser's vision. Hugo Schmeisser, already famous for German submachine guns, approached the design differently from traditional rifles. Key features: stamped steel receiver, simple cost-effective construction, open-bolt full-auto fire, early versions, closed-bolt semi-auto fire, easily mass-produced, highly reliable in dirt and mud, excellent ergonomics for stormtroops. Tests showed that the MKB-42H had good accuracy, was controllable in bursts, worked exceptionally well in winter conditions, impressed frontline soldiers. It was the early favorite. MKB-42W, Walther's entry. Walther's version used more traditional machining. Key features: milled receiver, more complex internal parts, open bolt operation for both firing modes, excellent craftsmanship, high accuracy. But it was heavier, more expensive, and slower to produce. In wartime, those were fatal flaws. Field trials on the Eastern Front. Thousands of MKB rifles were sent to specialized units for combat evaluation, especially infantry assault groups, reconnaissance units, frontline rifle squads, Eastern Front stormtroops. Reports were overwhelmingly positive. This weapon increases firepower of a single squad dramatically. Ideal for forest and village fighting. Superior to submachine guns and bolt-action rifles. Soldiers demanded more. Commanders demanded more. The future seemed clear. The MKB-42H was outperforming expectations. It was reliable, deadly, easy to use, and exactly what Germany needed. But then, everything stopped. The unexpected obstacle: Hitler himself. The program was interrupted at the highest political level. Hitler, still focused on large-caliber rifles and long-range engagements, did not believe Germany needed a new cartridge or a new class of weapons. He insisted on maintaining 7.92 by 57 rifle doctrine, traditional long-range infantry combat, standardized ammunition production. To him, these MKB rifles were unnecessary distractions. So he ordered the cancellation of the program. It should have ended there, but it didn't, because the Eastern Front was demanding the opposite. To keep the project alive, German engineers and officers were forced to deceive Hitler, renaming the weapon, hiding the program, and continuing development in secret. The political roadblock. The infantry loved the new rifle. Frontline commanders demanded it. Engineers were ready to mass produce it. But one man could stop everything with a single sentence. And he did. Adolf Hitler personally rejected the MKB program. Not because the weapon failed, not because the design was flawed, not because the cartridge was weak. He rejected it for reasons rooted in doctrine, Edo, and wartime logistics. This is the truth behind the Hitler banned the STG-44 story, stripped of myths, based only on documented facts. Why Hitler said no. Hitler believed deeply in long-range infantry accuracy, high-power rifle cartridges, old-school marksmanship doctrine, logistical simplicity, standardized ammunition types. He wanted every soldier to be equipped with a weapon capable of long-range precision, even though real battles in 1942-43 did not happen at 800-1,000 meters. Hitler was behind the curve. He dismissed intermediate cartridges entirely. In a conference memo, he stated, "The infantry does not require a new rifle caliber." He did not see the need for a new weapon class. The boomerang effect, old doctrine versus new reality. While Hitler clung to the past, Eastern Front reports painted a different picture. Soviet PPSH units overwhelming German lines, close-range Ergen combat in Stalingrad, forest fighting reducing visibility, heavy losses during Soviet shock operations. German squads drastically outgunned at mid-range. General Paulus during the Stalingrad fighting wrote, "Our soldiers require a weapon capable of high fire volume at close and medium distances." But Hitler did not change his mind. Hitler's concern, logistics and industry. Germany was already struggling to supply ammunition, maintain production lines, consolidate calibers, support new weapon programs. Introducing a new cartridge, 7.92 by 33 Kurz, would increase complexity. Hitler believed it would strain Germany's already failing logistics. He wasn't entirely wrong, but he was strategically blind to the frontline need. Hitler's order: cancel the program. In early 1943, Hitler ordered development halted, production stopped, MKB rifle prototypes frozen, no new intermediate cartridge weapons approved. This should have been the end. But the Army Weapons Office saw the reality on the ground, and they knew something Hitler did not. The MKB rifles were already proving decisive in field trials. If they stopped now, German infantry firepower would fall even further behind the Soviets. So they made a choice. A bold one, a dangerous one. The secret continuation. German officers and engineers decided to keep the project alive in defiance of Hitler's order. But they couldn't call it MKB anymore. So they renamed it. The designation changed from MKB-42H to MP-43, Machine Pistol 43. The word machine pistol made Hitler believe it was simply another submachine gun, a harmless SMG, not a new class of rifle, not a new cartridge revolution, not a change in doctrine. This deception worked. The program continued, quietly, in factories, in test fields, and on the Eastern Front. The weapon that would become the STG-44 survived only because engineers hid it behind a name. But names weren't enough. The front demanded results. And when the MP-43 reached combat, soldiers sent back reports so strong that even Hitler couldn't ignore them. Eastern Front combat tests. Soldiers demand the weapon. The renaming worked. The project survived. But survival wasn't enough. To keep the MP-43 alive, engineers needed something far more powerful than bureaucratic trickery. Proof. Proof that this new weapon, this machine pistol that wasn't a machine pistol at all, could change the battlefield. So in 1943, the first batches of MP-43 rifles were quietly shipped to the Eastern Front. Not to elite units, not to propaganda troops, but to the places where the fighting was at its most brutal. Forested sectors in the north, swampy lowlands, villages on the Dnieper, ruined industrial towns, front lines shifting day by day. These were the places where standard infantry weapons struggled most. And here, the MP-43 began to speak for itself. The first reactions, shock at the firepower. The initial feedback stunned German officers. In reports from infantry companies near Vitebsk and Nivelle, soldiers wrote, "This is the first weapon that allows us to stop Soviet assaults without heavy support. The fire volume is overwhelming compared to rifles. One man with MP-43 equals several with Kar 98K in close combat." For the first time, German soldiers could fire accurately in semi-auto, deliver controlled bursts, suppress enemies at mid-range, fight effectively in forests and trenches, It changed squad dynamics completely. A new type of combat. Soviet infantry were accustomed to facing slow bolt-action fire, occasional submachine gun bursts, MG-34, MG-42 machine guns anchoring German squads. But the MP-43 created a new threat, a squad where every soldier could produce high-volume fire. This was revolutionary. Soviet reports from the second half of 1943 noted an unidentified automatic rifle that produced rapid, accurate fire, greater lethality at medium range, sudden bursts during assaults. One Red Army officer wrote, "The Germans have introduced a weapon between our SVT rifles and PPSH submachine guns." He didn't know it yet, but he was describing the first assault rifle in history. Frontline commanders pushed back against Berlin. German officers were so impressed with the MP-43 that they began writing direct memos to high command. Request immediate expansion of production. Weapon performs flawlessly in extreme conditions. Superior to Soviet automatic arms. Should be issued at company level as primary rifle. The momentum was building. Hitler still doesn't know the truth. Remember, Hitler still believed the MP-43 was just another submachine gun. He didn't understand, or wasn't told, that it used a new cartridge. It replaced the bolt-action rifle. It filled the mid-range combat gap. It represented a new weapon class. This allowed production to increase, slowly, carefully, quietly. The turning point, the soldiers forced Berlin's hand. Autumn 1943. A thick package of field reports arrives in Berlin. Not propaganda, not theory, not wishful thinking. Evidence. Hundreds of soldiers praising the weapon. Dozens of officers requesting full adoption. Detailed analyses of MP-43 outperforming rifles and SMGs. Test results showing high reliability in mud, rain, and snow. The reports described a weapon that increased squad firepower dramatically, reduced ammunition consumption, improved close to mid-range performance, boosted morale, outmatched Soviet automatic weapons. Germany suddenly had something it desperately needed, a weapon that could give one infantryman the firepower of a group. Even Hitler could not ignore the results forever. To keep the program alive, the MP-43 needed a political breakthrough, and it came in the form of another deception, renaming it again to MP-44. From MP-43 to MP-44, the name that hid a revolution. By late 1943, the MP-43 had proven itself beyond doubt. Frontline reports were overflowing with praise. Commanders were demanding more. Soldiers were calling it the best weapon they had ever used. But despite all of that, the project still lived under a shadow. Hitler still believed it was nothing more than a new submachine gun. If he realized it was a rifle, firing a new cartridge designed to replace the Kar 98K, he might shut it down permanently. So the engineers and ordnance officers made their next move. They changed the name again. Why rename it? Because names were political weapons inside the Third Reich. Rifle, Gewehr, new weapon class, Hitler rejects. Carbine, Karabiner, implies new ammo, Hitler rejects. Machine pistol, Maschinenpistole, Hitler approves without objection. So the MP-43 became the MP-44. Maschinenpistole 44. A harmless designation. A small, insignificant change. Just a new number for an already approved weapon system. Except it wasn't insignificant. This renaming hid the program for several more crucial months. The MP-44 field performance. Throughout early 1944, thousands of MP-44 rifles reached the Eastern Front. German infantry squads were transformed. Higher fire volume, more flexible tactics, better suppression capability, deadlier in forests and villages. Reports noted, soldiers prefer this weapon over all others. MP-44 is decisive in counterattacks. Morale improves when equipped with this rifle. Meanwhile, Soviet troops were encountering the weapon more frequently. One Red Army intelligence report described it as a German automatic rifle capable of precision and rapid fire at medium distance. This was not an SMG, not a carbine, not a traditional rifle. It was something new, something the world had never seen. Hitler begins to notice. In early 1944, Hitler attended a weapons demonstration. The MP-44 performed impressively. Accuracy, fire rate, burst control, everything the frontline soldiers praised. But Hitler still misunderstood its role. He saw it as a better SMG, not as the foundation of a new infantry doctrine. The deception held. Engineers continued refining the weapon, strengthening the stamped receiver, improving the gas system, redesigning the handguards, enhancing reliability in mud and frozen conditions. Germany now had a robust, reliable, mass-producible prototype of what would become the first assault rifle in history. All it needed was a final political breakthrough. The frontline pressure explodes. By mid-1944, the Eastern Front was collapsing. Soviet forces were launching massive offensives. German infantry desperately needed increased firepower, lighter ammunition load, weapons suited for chaotic battles, replacements for bolt-action rifles. Generals began directly pressuring the high command. We must standardize MP-44 immediately. This weapon increases combat effectiveness greatly. Rifle squads with MP-44 hold positions longer under attack. Hitler could not ignore these reports. The situation was too dire. And then it happened. A simple question at a command meeting. What is this new weapon the soldiers keep praising? The truth was finally brought to him. But instead of shutting it down, he gave it something unexpected. Hitler didn't just approve the weapon, he renamed it again, personally, and with one word, he created the term assault rifle. Hitler finally approves the weapon, the birth of the Sturmgewehr. By mid-1944, Germany was running out of time. The Eastern Front was collapsing. Army groups were retreating under the weight of massive Soviet offensives. Infantry divisions were exhausted, under strength, and outgunned. Yet, in their after-action reports, one weapon kept appearing again and again: MP-44. Commanders described it as decisive. Infantry squads described it as life-saving. Even skeptical staff officers admitted it fundamentally changed firepower at the platoon level. Hitler could not ignore this chorus any longer. The moment of truth arrived. The meeting that changed infantry warfare forever. In late summer 1944, during a weapons conference, Hitler asked directly, "What is this new machine pistol the troops are praising?" For the first time, the truth was stated clearly. The MP-44 was not a machine pistol at all. It was a new class of rifle. It fired a new cartridge. It combined the roles of rifle, carbine, and SMG. It was designed for real infantry fighting distances. It offered vastly superior firepower per soldier. Instead of reacting with anger, Hitler was intrigued. He examined the weapon personally. He fired it. He inspected its stamped steel construction. He watched demonstrations showing rapid bursts, controlled semi-auto fire, and mid-range accuracy. For the first time, he understood what the frontline reports were really about. Hitler's question: what do we call this? A name matters. A name shapes doctrine, identity, and propaganda. The MP-44 was not a rifle, not an SMG, not a carbine. It was a weapon designed for the assault, for storming positions. This resonated with Hitler's obsession with offensive spirit. He declared, "Call it Sturmgewehr," assault rifle. This was not just a renaming. This was the creation of a new word, a new weapon category, a new doctrine. For the first time in history, a firearm was officially classified as Sturmgewehr equals assault rifle. And with Hitler's approval, the weapon finally received its permanent name, Sturmgewehr 44, STG-44, the world's first true assault rifle recognized as such. Why Hitler suddenly changed his mind? Historians identify several factors. 1. Overwhelmingly positive frontline reports. Entire sectors held longer when equipped with MP-44 rifles. 2. Desperation for increased infantry firepower. Germany's manpower situation was catastrophic. 3. The psychological appeal of storm and assault. Hitler loved symbolic names that implied aggression and morale. 4. The potential to replace multiple weapon types at once. KAR-98K plus MP-40K plus G-43 consolidated into one platform. 5. The realism forced by battlefield reports. War had changed. Germany had no choice. The impact of the name. The word Sturmgewehr did more than rename a rifle. It defined a category. Intermediate cartridge, selective fire, controllable bursts, effective at 0 to 400 meters, light enough for mobile infantry, accurate enough for aimed shots, powerful enough for suppression. Every modern infantry rifle, from the AK-47 to the M16 to the HK-416, inherits this concept. It all began with the approval of the STG-44. Production finally ramps up. After Hitler's approval, factories accelerated stamping. Hanel and Walther increased output. New contracts were signed. Ammunition production expanded. Frontline units were prioritized for delivery. But it was too late for miracles. The STG-44 would soon reach the front in large numbers. But Germany was already collapsing. Still, its performance would leave a deep mark. Now that the STG-44 was officially born, we must look inside it. How it worked, why it was reliable, and what made it decades ahead of its time. Inside the STG-44, design, mechanics, and why it was decades ahead of its time. With Hitler's approval and a new name, Sturmgewehr 44, Germany finally had a weapon that matched the realities of modern warfare. But the STG-44 wasn't revolutionary just because of its concept. It was revolutionary because of how it was built. In 1944, almost no army in the world had anything like it. Stamped steel construction, intermediate cartridge, selective fire, ergonomic layout, reliable gas system, controllable automatic bursts. This wasn't an evolution. It was a leap. A blueprint for every future assault rifle. Let's open it up. Stamped steel, the future of weapon production. Unlike traditional rifles made by slow, expensive machining, the STG-44 was built largely from stamped metal. Why this mattered? Faster to produce, cheaper to produce, lighter overall construction, easier to train new workers, reduced need for skilled machining labor. The Soviets and Americans would later use this same philosophy in rifles like AK-47, M16, G3, FNAL. In 1944, this approach was decades ahead. Germany ironically pioneered the mass production method they desperately needed. The gas system, simple, robust, reliable. The STG-44 used a short-stroke gas piston, one of the most reliable systems ever created. Advantages: easy to clean, tolerant of dirt, snow, and mud, minimal fouling, smooth cycling, excellent function in extreme cold. This system influenced countless later designs. It wasn't perfect, but it was far more reliable than many wartime semi-automatics. Selective fire, semi-auto or full auto on command. The STG-44 gave each soldier tactical choice. Semi-auto for accuracy and ammo control. Full auto for suppression, assaults, and emergencies. This combination didn't exist in a general-issue infantry rifle anywhere else in WWII. It allowed flexible squad tactics, higher fire volume, greater shock effect in close combat, true storming capability. A German squad with STG-44s didn't fight like a 1940s unit. They fought like a modern infantry platoon. Ergonomics, designed for real combat. The STG-44 had features that became standard only decades later. Pistol grip for better control. Inline stock reducing muzzle climb. Curved 30-round magazine. Relatively compact length for trench and forest combat. Iron sights optimized for mid-range. It handled more like an AK-47 or M98K. Soldiers repeatedly praised. Unusual stability during bursts. Comfortable balance. Easier to aim quickly under pressure. This was the birth of rifle ergonomics as we know them. The Kurz cartridge makes it work. The STG-44 did not rely on heavy recoil. It didn't kick like a horse. It wasn't uncontrollable. The 7.92 x 33 Kurz was tuned precisely. Enough power to drop a man at 300 to 400 meters. Low recoil for bursts. Lighter ammo load. Flatter trajectory at mid-range. The rifle plus cartridge combination was the real innovation. Modern assault rifles still follow this template. Weaknesses: it wasn't a perfect machine. The STG-44 had flaws. Heavy for its class, 11.5 pounds, 5.2 kilograms. Long and awkward with the curved magazine. Complicated receiver cover. Susceptible to damage at gas block if hit. Required more maintenance than an AK-47, but compared to full power rifles and SMGs, it was a quantum leap forward. A rifle out of its time. In 1944, Germany fielded a weapon that belonged to the 1950s or 60s. No one else had anything comparable. The US had full-powered M1 Garands. The British had bolt-action Lee Enfields. The Soviets had PPSH and Mosin Nagants. Japan and Italy still relied heavily on old designs. Only Germany had taken the step into modern infantry firepower. The problem? It arrived too late. What did soldiers think of the STG-44 in real combat? The frontline reviews were brutally honest, and they show exactly why this rifle changed everything. Frontline performance, what soldiers really said about the STG-44. Once the Sturmgewehr 44 reached frontline units in meaningful numbers, something remarkable happened. The soldiers immediately understood what they had been missing for the entire war. The STG-44 wasn't a theoretical improvement. It wasn't a propaganda weapon. It wasn't a laboratory experiment. It was a battlefield answer. And the men who carried it, tired, freezing, hungry, outnumbered, left behind some of the most striking, honest commentary of any weapon in World War II. The first reactions: shock at the firepower. Infantry in late 1944 were exhausted and under pressure. Most divisions were shadows of their former strength. Then came the STG-44. A soldier from the 352nd Infantry Division wrote, "For the first time, I felt we had equal firepower to the Russians." Another report stated, "A squad with 5 STG rifles fights like a much larger unit." Frontline troops were not exaggerating. The STG-44 gave German rifle squads higher rate of fire, better suppression, faster reaction times, more flexibility in urban and forest combat, the ability to handle multiple Soviet assaults. This weapon didn't just improve effectiveness, it changed the psychology of the men carrying it. Urban combat, a new kind of advantage. In places like Warsaw, Budapest, and East Prussia, soldiers described the STG-44 as ideal for room clearing, defending stairwells, firing from windows, street ambushes, sudden, vicious close-quarters fights. Submachine guns had done this before, but only at short range. The STG-44 extended dominance into the 100 to 300 meter space, the most common engagement range in ruined cities. A report from Comp Group units in Hungary noted, "No other rifle suits the fighting in ruins as well as the STG. Forest and village combat, the perfect match." Eastern Front combat often took place in forests, swamps, scattered villages, broken terrain. Bolt-action rifles were slow. SMGs lacked range. The STG-44 filled the gap perfectly. Accurate semi-auto shots, controllable bursts, high-capacity magazine, fast target transitions. A veteran wrote, "It beats the PPS at close range and beats the Mosin at mid-range. This is exactly what the weapon had been designed for." Reliability, better than expected. One of the persistent myths is that the STG-44 was unreliable. Frontline reports say otherwise. Soldiers praised function in extreme cold, resistance to mud, stability of the gas system, easy clearing of malfunctions, consistent feeding with the curved magazine. Not perfect, but far better than critics claim. A report from Army Group Center in early 1945, the Storm Gewehr has proven highly reliable even under intense frost. Morale effects, the weapon boosted confidence. Morale is not a technical metric, but it matters more than almost anything in combat. Multiple reports stated, troops equipped with the STG fight with greater determination. When units knew they could match Soviet firepower, their survival odds increased, and so did their willingness to hold ground. But there were problems. Soldiers were honest, and they noted issues. Weapon was heavy, barrel heated quickly in automatic fire, long magazines got in the way when prone, ammunition supply was inconsistent, spare parts were hard to get, training was limited due to time shortages. The weapon was excellent, the situation around it was catastrophic. The Soviet view, respect. Captured STG-44 rifles were immediately examined by Soviet units. Red Army comments, "The German automatic rifle is effective at all practical ranges. Our troops often pick it up during battle. It fills a role between our PPS and SVT rifles." The Soviets understood what the weapon represented, and they took note. Now for the most controversial question of all. Did the STG-44 influence the AK-47? The truth is more complicated and more interesting than myths suggest.
Did the STG-44 influence the AK-47? The truth behind the most controversial question in firearms history. Few questions in weapons history create as much debate as this one. Some claim the AK-47 is a copy of the STG-44. Others insist it has no connection at all. The truth, as usual, is somewhere in between and backed by real documents, engineering studies, and post-war interviews. Let's break it down carefully, factually, step by step. 1. The STG-44 and AK-47 do not share internal mechanisms. This is the most important fact. Inside, the rifles are completely different. The STG-44 uses a tilting bolt locking system. The AK-47 uses a rotating bolt system derived from the Garand and SVT-40 patterns. This alone proves the AK is not a copy. If Kalashnikov wanted to copy the STG-44, he would have used its locking system. He didn't. 2. The external appearance created the myth. The silhouette, curved magazine, pistol grip, inline stock, similar length, similar stance. This makes many people assume the AK is based on the STG-44. But external shape tells you nothing about internal mechanisms. In reality, both rifles simply followed the logic of a modern assault rifle. Intermediate cartridge, select fire, straight line recoil, ergonomic pistol grip. The STG-44 created the concept, not the design. 3. The Soviets already had experience with similar concepts. Before the AK-47 appeared, Soviet engineers had SVT-40, semi-auto rifle with a rotating bolt. AS-44, early Sov assault rifle prototype 1944. Fedorov Automat 1916, arguably the world's first practical assault rifle. The idea of a mid-range, select-fire rifle was not new to the USSR. The STG-44 reinforced the concept, not introduced it. 4. Kalashnikov's own words. In interviews from the 1970s-2000s, Kalashnikov stated, "I studied all weapons, including captured German ones, but the AK-47 is my own design." He admitted examining the STG-44, this was normal practice, every army does it. But he always emphasized the AK's mechanics came from Garand, SVT-40, Soviet design principles, his own team at Kovrov and Izhevsk. And this matches technical reality. 5. Soviet documentation confirms parallel development. Declassified documents from the Soviet archives post-1991 reveal the USSR captured many STG-44 rifles in 1943 to 1945. They were studied extensively by NIPSMVO, Soviet Proving Ground. Reports concluded the STG-44 was, quote, effective but mechanically outdated, unquote. The Soviets liked the concept, not the mechanism. The intermediate cartridge idea did influence them. The Soviets developed their own 7.62 by 41, later 7.62 by 39. They also pursued select-fire rifles. This happened before the final AK-47 design. So yes, the overall philosophy aligned with STG-44 thinking, but not the engineering. 6. What the STG-44 actually contributed. Conceptual influence, yes. Intermediate cartridge, select fire, compact rifle, multi-role infantry weapon. Mechanical influence, no. Different bolt, different receiver design, different gas system, different assembly philosophy. Aesthetics, yes. Similar general shape, curved magazine due to cartridge shape. Functionality, shared philosophy. Both rifles were designed for the same battlefield reality. That's why they look similar, not because one copied the other. 7. The final verdict, the real documented truth. The AK-47 did not mechanically descend from the STG-44. They share no major internal systems. But the STG-44 absolutely influenced global military thinking, including in the USSR. The STG-44 didn't give birth to the AK-47, but it gave birth to the idea of the modern assault rifle. The AK-47 was the next evolutionary step. Built with Soviet engineering principles, firing a Soviet cartridge through a Soviet development program. Now that the STG-44's place in firearms history is clear, we must face the final tragedy: why this revolutionary weapon arrived too late to change the fate of Nazi Germany. Why the STG-44 arrived too late. The tragedy of perfect timing in a lost war. By the time the STG-44 finally reached German infantry in meaningful numbers, the war it was designed for was already slipping away. This weapon had the potential to reshape infantry combat. It was decades ahead of its time. It solved every major firepower problem the German army faced. But a rifle, even a revolutionary one, cannot save a collapsing nation. To understand why the STG-44 couldn't change the course of WWII, we must look beyond the weapon itself. The tragedy lies not in its design, but in its timing. 1. Too late to influence infantry doctrine. Germany needed the STG-44 in 1941 during Operation Barbarossa, when engagements were chaotic, mobile, and brutal at mid-range. They needed it in 1942 during Stalingrad, where room-to-room fighting punished bolt-action rifles. They needed it in 1943 at Kurz, where Soviet infantry overwhelmed German lines with automatic fire. Instead, the STG-44 reached mass distribution only in late 1944. By then, Germany was in retreat everywhere. Divisions were under strength. Supply lines were collapsing. Rail networks were destroyed by bombing. Fuel shortages crippled the army. A new rifle could not reverse these structural failures. 2. Production numbers were too small. The STG-44 was mass-producible on paper. In reality, Germany's industrial situation was catastrophic. Allied bombing raids destroyed factories. Skilled workers were gone. Steel was scarce. Transportation was unreliable. Ammunition production couldn't keep up. The result? Only about 425,000 STG-44 rifles were produced. On a war of millions, this wasn't enough. Compare
14 million Mosin Nagants, 6 million PPSH-41s, 4 million Lee Enfields, 5+ million M1 carbines, 49,000 Shermans, 57,000 T-34s. A brilliant weapon cannot overcome overwhelming numbers. 3. Germany's manpower crisis. By 1944 to 1945, frontline divisions were half-strength. Many infantry units were filled with barely trained recruits. Casualties could not be replaced. Volksgrenadier units lacked experience. A great weapon in inexperienced hands has limited impact. Veteran soldiers praised the STG-44. Raw recruits often couldn't exploit its potential. 4. Logistics could not support it. Even when units received STG-44 rifles, many reported shortages of magazines, 7.92 × 33 Kurz ammunition, spare parts. In some cases, units received the rifle but no ammo resupply, forcing them to revert back to Kar 98K rifles. The weapon was excellent, the supply chain was broken. 5. Germany needed strategy, not innovation. By late 1944, the Wehrmacht faced crises far beyond small arms. Soviet offensives with overwhelming numbers. U.S. and British mechanized forces advancing relentlessly. Total Allied air superiority. Fuel shortages. Destroyed transportation networks. Collapsing morale. Even a perfect rifle cannot defeat tanks, artillery, aircraft, logistics, strategic encirclements. The STG-44 solved one battlefield problem, but Germany had 20 more that were fatal. 6. Used too late to shape the future of WWII, but early enough to shape the future of warfare. The STG-44 didn't save Germany, but it changed the world. It influenced the development of almost every post-war rifle. It reshaped infantry doctrine. It became the direct ancestor of the assault rifle era. Its tragedy is simple. It was the right weapon, for the right reasons, at the wrong time. Now comes the final part, the legacy. How the STG-44, despite being too late to save Germany, managed to redefine military history for generations. The legacy. How the STG-44 created the modern assault rifle. The war ended. The Reich collapsed. Factories burned. The front dissolved into ruins. The STG-44, a weapon that arrived too late to save Germany, might have vanished into history as an interesting footnote. But it didn't. Instead, it became the bridge between two eras of warfare, the past of bolt-action rifles and the future of modern infantry weapons. Its true impact began after the war. This is the legacy the STG-44 left behind. 1. The first true assault rifle, the template. Before the STG-44, no general-issue infantry weapon had an intermediate cartridge, select fire, controllable automatic bursts, optimized mid-range combat design, ergonomic modern layout. It created the formula we still use today. Intermediate round plus select fire plus magazine fed equals assault rifle. Every modern military adopted this logic. The STG-44 didn't just start a class of weapons. It defined it. 2. It proved that mid-range dominance wins infantry battles. The STG-44 validated what battlefield reality had already shown. Most combat happens at 100 to 300 meters. Not 800 meters, not 1,000 meters. The weapon that dominates this range dominates infantry warfare. Modern rifles, M16, AK-47, G36, SCAR, HK-416, all follow this rule. The STG-44 proved it in blood. 3. It influenced post-war designs conceptually, not mechanically. Even though the internal mechanisms of the STG-44 are different from modern rifles, its ideas directly shaped future weapons. The need for intermediate cartridges, the value of stamped metal production, the importance of select fire,
the virtue of ergonomic grip plus inline stock, the supremacy of rapid semi-auto fire. Dozens of nations studied captured STG-44s after the war, including Soviet Union, United States, United Kingdom, France, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia. Its influence spread everywhere. 4. The AK-47 and M16 exist because the STG-44 proved the concept. The STG-44 did not mechanically father the AK-47, but it made the AK-47 possible. It created the environment, the doctrinal shift, that made intermediate cartridge rifles inevitable. Likewise, the M16 emerged from the same conceptual tree. Lightweight rifle, high fire volume, controllable cartridge, select fire, optimized for mid-range. The STG-44 was the seed from which two branches of world firearms grew. 5. The rifle that shouldn't have existed. Politically blocked, technically misclassified, logistically impossible, produced too late. Yet the STG-44 still became the father of the assault rifle family, the proof of concept for modern infantry weapons, one of WWII's most historically significant inventions. It was a masterpiece born in the wrong time, but the right century. 6. Its place in today's world. Today, STG-44 rifles still appear in private collections, museums, Middle Eastern conflicts, Syrian civil war, yes, they were found in use, historical reenactments, firearms research institutions. Its silhouette instantly recognizable. Long curved magazine, sturdy stamped receiver, wooden stock, pistol grip, distinctive profile. A design from 1944 that looks like it belongs in 1960. That's the power of revolutionary engineering. 7. The final truth. The STG-44 didn't save Germany. It didn't change World War II. It didn't arrive in time. But it did change everything that came after. It marked the end of the old world of bolt-action rifles and heavy battle rifles, and the beginning of the modern era of mobile, flexible, rapid-fire infantry tactics. The STG-44 is not remembered because it won battles. It is remembered because it changed warfare. The rifle that was too late for its own war, but right on time for the next century. The first true assault rifle. The Sturmgewehr, the STG-44.